Hey, what's up, y'all? This is MVP with Juxtaposed. Today, we're going to talk to Krystin Hargrove, and we're going to have a good time. Stay tuned.
So we are back for another episode of Juxtaposed. Today we have my friend Krystin Hargrove. How do we even start to introduce all the things that you do? I think I'm gonna let you do that.
Oh my goodness. Well, let's talk about when we met. We actually all worked at the same company.
Yeah.
That shall not be
That shall
named.
not be named.
Shall not be named.
real.
But I think we're all super entrepreneurial. I think that's where our connection came from. We had worked together because in that space, I'm an accountant. Let's just start there.
Okay.
I went to school for accounting. I did that for 12 years. But I've always been entrepreneurial. I've always kind of had that side of me. And I started as a blogger, and I was still working at a company that will not be named. And just kind of watching that as a startup, because I had no idea of like the startup ecosystem. So like looking at these guys, like they're pretty young guys, close to my age, and then being immersed in like raising money and seeing the transition inside the company from like kind of small business to like scaling startup. It was just very eye-opening. And I was like, how can I tap into that? And so from there, we worked together on a couple of things. And I had a couple of businesses going. I had like a women's empowerment business. And now I'm the founder of Co-Tripper, which is a lifestyle and parenting platform for single moms. So that's what we're doing. We have an app. If you guys are so inclined, go to app.cotripper.co and sign up.
Plug.
We host chat apps and groups for single moms. So that's kind of where I'm at now, and a little bit about where I've been.
Sounds good. How did you end up like stumbling into the niche of the single moms? Because I do think like it's interesting to hear, and actually being a part of some of the stuff that you've done, I'm just like, wow, this is like you don't think about it. Especially as a person with no children and a man, I think there's a whole different world there.
Things
But
that are just a little different.
I learned so much just doing video work with her about this stuff. So like, how did you end up realizing that this was a like unserviced niche?
Life, child, life. Okay. Being a single mom, I think when you are when I became a parent, of course, I had a partner, and then kind of stepping into a lifestyle as a single mom, it was just a lot different than it was a lot different than what I feel like the landscape messaged. And I also grew up with a single mom. So quite honestly, like in my upbringing, I didn't really experience like, like a position of lack, right? But then when I became a single mom, I just realized like, wow, like my mom had to do all of these things without a partner. And I felt as a working mom, like I needed help. Number one, it was like I needed help in community because it was like all my friends were in partnerships or married. And it was just like, who really understands like rushing home from work or doing the things that I have to do, coming home, being exhausted, taking care of my kids and still having the capacity to like nurture them with one person in the house. And so from there, it just went from kind of me wanting to travel. And I was like, well, I ain't giving that shit up. Okay, wait a damn minute. And so it was like, okay, well, how are single moms doing that? So the company started as a company geared towards helping single moms travel in small groups. This was in 2019 before the pandemic. And we all know.
How that went.
Yeah. But in that, I kind of developed a community, and then Co-Tripper kind of, it came about from the pandemic because it was like, okay, shit, we ain't traveling. And I have all these moms who probably are going through hell, literally, do not recommend small children in a pandemic with no space, no nothing, no childcare, right? And so pulling those groups into like a community, which is now we have like an app built, a specific community app, but pulling them on WhatsApp, actually, just to be like, how are y'all doing? Because I'm struggling. Okay, send help, please. That was kind of the segue into where we are now. But like, it really, to your question, it really stemmed from a real need to feel supported parenting this way. It felt like the parenting sites and the parenting spaces that I was entering, I still kind of came out of them empty. And the moms there were great. The organizations that I was going to, motherhood spaces were like booming at the time. It was like a lot of different just working women, motherhood spaces emerging at that time. And I just was like, man, like I just wish something existed like this for the lifestyle of a single mom or a single parent. And so I was inspired to build that, and already had the community because I was already kind of leaning in a pivot to move towards something new for co-trippers. So yeah, it was just like lives, and you have to find a solution.
Well, it is interesting hearing about, like, having to pivot from a travel company right before COVID. How did you keep going, especially knowing that, like, you had, like, 2019, I think you were, like, actually seeing a lot of traction.
Yeah.
You had, like, trips set up and stuff like that, to, like, well, no one's going anywhere. And I've built a company around travel, and there is no travel. Like, first of all, how did you keep going during that time? Because that alone sounds like enough to have stopped what you were doing.
Jesus is the reason for this season. Okay.
Amen.
Real talk. But I think, man, I'm gonna be honest. Like one day I was like, okay, I have put so much energy, effort, like of myself, with the limited capacities that I had being a single mom and managed. I put everything into this. Like I banked on this working from the standpoint of a travel company. So COVID was really hard, and I had to dig really deep and evaluate, like, what is the point of what I'm doing, right? Like what is the point? And I was like literally laying on the floor one day, like in prayer, like, God, I'm done. Like, I'm tired. I don't have I don't want to think about something else. Pivoting was scary to me. It was like, in some ways, as an entrepreneur, you have to be like agile and like be able to pivot, but the act of actually doing it, especially when something is like blown up in your face, isn't easy. So really, like, I just was on the ground one day and was like, I really want to serve these women. That's what I just felt in my spirit. It was like, and if travel isn't it, my prayer is that I find a way to help women like me, because it's not like travel was, it never was the real vision for Co-Tripper, right? The real vision for Co-Tripper was like really rooted in a community space. Whatever product helped us achieve that, really geared towards supporting women and single moms, right? And giving them a storyline that wasn't what society and social stigma has projected upon them, right? So I always wanted it to be this space where single moms were safe and seen. And then not from a supportive, like, oh girl, you're gonna be all right, you don't need that man, like from a thriving perspective, like you're capable of doing the things in this lifestyle as like parenting this way, and seeing real examples of that, and hearing powerful, positive stories about that, because I feel like it's always negative. Like you need to date, or you need a man, or like, or you ain't got no money. And sometimes we ain't got no money, but sometimes everybody ain't got no money. Okay, broke is not.
Yeah.
Listen, it's given. Anybody could be broke. It's given that. Yeah. And so yeah, just wanting to change the narrative. I think our mission is to really redefine single motherhood, and really in this period of time, for however long that moms are parenting this way, or even living this way as women, that they have positive examples. They have women that they can come to who really understand and truly relate to some of the challenges that they face. So when I came to that realization, it was like a release. Like, I'm like, okay, pivoting isn't hard. Like, you have the community. It's really about not quitting at that point. Yeah. As the founder, as a creator, as whatever you want to call yourself. Like, it's so easy to stop. It's like, okay, I'm gonna stop doing that. It didn't work. I think the harder thing to do is to continue and to figure out, like, how to make it work. Like, if this is your passion and your purpose and something that you really want to do, you just cannot quit.
Yeah.
And it's hard. There's no, everybody has, how do you do something? I think it's more like, if you connect yourself to something you really feel purposed to do, you will some way find a way to do it. And I think that's just all it was for me.
Yeah. There's a lot there. I think of even us here, during the pandemic, we had kind of grinded to a halt. Like we would literally stop doing podcasts. We lost 2 hosts. It was a lot of stuff. And then, we came back and we're able to continue along the path. And it is not easy. And I think that's the one part about doing anything creative. It's not easy, and people see the highlight reel and the wins, but it's like, how many losses I took to get to here.
And another thing I think about when I feel like I'm about to quit is like, okay, MVP, if you're gonna quit, then what else you about to do?
Right.
That usually keeps me going because I'm like, oh, I'm just gonna be sitting here watching TV. I'm like, yeah, I probably should keep, like, unless you got something really else going on.
Right.
Why would you quit pursuing that dream or goal that you have?
Yeah.
So.
And it's okay to pause. Like you said, like, I think consistency is super important. Consistency is something I struggle with, just because of the demands of life, and trying to see something through pockets of, maybe when you're not doing well as a person, or you're experiencing loss, or like all these factors that life brings to you. Consistency is really important. But I think the power in being able to pivot for me was to really like take push pause and reset, right? Instead of trying to continue on a path that isn't working, or to us in that case was not even possible, like nobody was traveling, like you almost have to take a beat and be like, okay, like let me restructure, let me figure out what I want to do. And so it's nothing wrong with pausing, like as long as you're still moving forward in some aspects. And that might not be like consistent podcast. That might be like, hey guys, communication. I think ease is something that we make people believe is true when it's not, right? So of course you want to put out a great output, but you also want to be transparent with your audience and your team or whoever that you're working with, to be like, hey, like this is what's going on. This is why. It's all a part of your story. And so, I was just transparent with him. I was like, I don't know what the fuck I'm doing. Hey, I want to help y'all. You know what I'm saying? I want to help myself, right? I'm being honest. I'm not saying like a part of me wanting to help other people comes from a personal place. So it's also really me wanting to help myself, right? And so, yeah, I think like it's okay to like go through these times where you're pivoting or you're pausing, as long as you're still moving forward. And sometimes that means doing that behind the scenes.
As you talk about that, one of the reasons I feel like I've always like kept myself or like around your circle is because you have this fearless approach to things that I do not have. And I was like, if you could rub like something that could rub off on me, I'll get it. Like in certain areas, I feel like, yeah, you can't tell me anything. But like when it comes to like this creative thing, I feel like you go into everything with what appears like a lot of just like fearlessness. Like how do you approach things that way?
Man, I fear a lot, man. My underarms sweat all the time. Like I, you know what I mean? Like if I'm on a panel or I'm pitching, like inside my body is a wreck. I'm just really good at like, you know what I mean? Like turning it on. I think that's my superpower, is that I am often scared and don't know what the fuck I'm doing. As I said, like, I don't know how many times in this thing already. But I like a challenge. I like to, I don't know, push myself through those things. Like, okay, I'm feeling that, but I still have to perform. I still have to pitch or talk to this investor or talk to my community and do it in ways that they all need to receive the information. And so there's a lot of fear and doubt and insecurity that I experienced doing that. But what I've learned is that after the thing I'm fearful of is over, or after I navigate those feelings, I'm always coming out better on the other side of that, or with something I can use. And so, yeah, I'm confident. I think I'm confident. I'm not cocky. I'm a learner by nature. So everything I do, I feel like there's some kind of like learning aspect in it. And so that's what keeps me. A lot of people say this, like, it appears I'm a certain way. Or, which word did you
say? Fearless?
Fearless. It appears, I'm not fearless, but I don't know. I'm able to use it. I'm able to channel it, and again, like just keep moving forward.
Yeah, we have one other person who's like that is my Aaron, who does he like literally from the time I met him, he's just like, I'll do whatever. Like I remember he used to go on vacation by himself, and I'm like, I don't know how to do that,
It's the
right?
most
Like
liberating thing ever.
it's like, yeah, I'm used to, having a group when you're doing certain things, but yeah, like the fearless nature is always something that I like to have people around me, because it's like you start seeing, okay, well, there are feelings that you are having, but you're operating. Doesn't matter that they exist.
Yeah.
So that is an interesting place to be. I know you had some questions, and
Yeah, well, no, I was just gonna go back onto the fearless thing, because for me, it's a lot of talking to yourself. I feel like, hey, you got this, you can do this,
Right.
and then when I come off to people, I'm like, I remember times where I have to like present at the company that I'm at. We have like big all hand meetings. And I'm up there and I'm like, my kneecaps are shaking, right? I'm like, and this and that. And I go back and I'm like, Styles, like, how'd I do? He's like, man, you were great. Da, 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 da. I'm like, bro, my knees were shaking.
Yeah.
He's like, really? I had no idea. So I do appreciate people like you who are able to challenge themselves and channel that nervous energy. Because if you're not challenging yourself, you're not pushing yourself to the next level, right?
Right.
So I just wanted to comment on the fearless thing, man. But no, you can go ahead. I feel like
yeah, no, I was gonna say, well, how do you also deal? I feel like we're just asking you all the personal
No,
questions.
ask away.
How do you deal with like you talk about insecurities and doubt, but like when you're conveying your message to people, and there are people who just say, oh, like nobody really wants to do that, or that's not a thing. And I feel like, I'm sure that as you've been going through this process, that's something you've had to come to terms with and not let it take the wind out of your sails.
Yeah.
So like talk to us about how you got to that, or got through that rather.
A rejection is fun, man. Like, you know what I'm saying? I mean, you got to put it in perspective.
Okay.
Like, it's like dating a little bit. You going after the girl, and she be like, nah, bruh. Like, you ain't it, friend zone, whatever it is.
So sad.
I know. Right?
Single tear.
Listen, I've been friend zone as a woman. I'm like, damn, okay. I feel like there's power in rejection, and I feel like the power is that you have to have almost like a radical belief in what you're doing. And I mean, I'm talking about single moms, right? I mean, how much love do we really get in across the board, right? And so I already expect that when I'm coming into the room, I'm talking about single moms. I'm going to hear things like, why not single dads? Why not single parents? Why not this? Why not that? And I'm just confident. I'm like, because I come to you from a place of experience, right? I'm not coming to you with an idea or a technology or something that, is new. It's like, this is lived experience. And what I'm telling you is that women tell me every day that these are the things that they need, right? These are the things that they feel. These are things that they want, right? And they don't have a space to exercise that. So for me, it's like, because I'm building something that comes from a lived and true experience and place, the rejection is just like, you don't see my vision and everybody's not for you. And everybody can't see your vision, right? I think the right people will see your vision at the right time and provide the right resources for you to push those things forward. And for me, it's like, okay, this is not my person. This is not my partner. This is not my, community member, whatever it is. So the rejection doesn't affect me, because I know that it's like a numbers game. If I talk to enough people, if I say this enough times, it's like talking to my son sometimes. Y'all are men. Y'all may have experienced this. And I be like, don't do that. Don't do that. Don't, over and over and over. So I think even as a parent, I literally say things over and over again. And I have to learn, like, how does my son need to thrive? Like, how do these people need it to be explained to them for them to see the real value in what I'm doing? And sometimes, you do have to convince people to see the value in what you're doing. So I think the rejection for me, it just tells me I need to improve as a storyteller, or it tells me that I'm not talking to the right person. This is not the person that's going to partner with me to get shit done, Yeah.
No, that is a hard one, and one I'm learning very actively, because it's like sometimes you do have to, realize that you are talking to the wrong person.
Mhm.
And you're oh no, you need to understand why I'm saying that. And they're like, but then do they really? Right? Like, do they really? Like, are you trying to sell, bananas to the guy who has the banana stand? Because then he's like, he
Right.
doesn't want what you're selling, right? Because
Right.
he already has it. So it's very interesting. I do I do want to talk about like some of the stuff I've seen with the not why single moms thing, because I feel like in the content we've done, I've watched like comments where like people are like aggressively against the ideas that you have, which honestly I don't feel like they're that radical, right? Like I don't think they're like, oh,
We're not anti-men. We're
Like,
not men bashing.
it's very
We're not-
interesting.
I think
And
that's
there is-
automatically assumed.
It is. It's a part of the society stuff. Yeah.
It is weird because there is a space where I do feel like there is a lot of man bashing, but I don't feel like you do that at all, right?
No.
And so it is interesting and that to hear it, like, how do you like deal with that? Like, do you just like
Don't read the
just
comments.
whatever, or
Okay. I think it stems from my journey as an entrepreneur, and I'm a firm believer in like trying multiple things. Like I know some people. There's always been this. I don't know, in my family, in my friendship, sometimes perception of like doing multiple things. Like, some people just want you to hone in, do one thing, be really great at that one thing. And I've just always been a person who has done multiple things. Like I'm not afraid to like pivot and jump and do this and try that. Right. And I think when I was a blogger, now called influencer, man, the comments were crazy. And so I think it was like, and I say that because I think everything you do prepares you for what you're really supposed to be purposed to do, right? It's a stepping stone, it's a learn. And I took beatings, man. Everything from being called like, you look like a man, she's a transgender person and all this stuff. Like just people saying wild shit on the internet just based off of like expressing your personal style or views or whatever. And so I think that was actually solid preparation for me to deal with what I'm dealing with now, because I used to fire back, man. I used to be like, what the, you know what I mean?
You won't even know me, man.
Like, really? But now I really don't care about people on the internet.
Okay.
Okay, listen. If you comment, thank you for the engagement metric that you provided this post. I appreciate you for watching. You know what I mean? I think that stance really came from me having experience in that realm, in that space, and just taking a beating oftentimes by strangers. So now I think I've built a skin where it's like, you can tell me, you could say whatever you want. Like, one monkey don't stop no show.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? Like, for me, I'm just like, I don't know. It doesn't affect me anymore, but I think that if I had not had the experience of like doing other things in the creative realm, that I would let that impact me. But now my views are so high, it's almost like the comments don't touch me as a person who's purposed, right? And knowing that these are people that probably have none, and that's just the truth about the matter.
Yeah.
Twitter fingers.
Yeah, I've seen some of the comments and I'm just like, people getting into whole arguments based on
With
one
themselves,
thing.
though.
Yeah, well,
That's the key.
one
It's
thing.
on themselves.
It's like
They're
I'm
projecting.
not responding.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I guess, how did you end up like going down the blogger route? Because that is
And we're talking back in the day now,
This
right? We're
is
talking about blogging.
2011.
Yeah.
Okay, 2011.
so
2012-ish.
young internet time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Honestly, I saw a dope blogger. Her name was Carla Darras, and she's now like owns a clothing line. But I saw her and was just like, man, she's dope. Like, and again, this was early in the space of like bloggers and influencers and stuff like that. And I've always been a creative person, and I thought that could be a great creative outlet. I think it really, if I took it a step further, I was an athlete, right? And so I've never really lived life doing one thing. Like, you know how you're in school and you're just a student. Well, I was a student athlete. So there was always a certain level of discipline, a certain level of like rigor and creativity in sports that I had, that when I became a like full-time, adult, like full-time, what do you call it? Like a fully employed adult after I graduated.
Young professional?
Young
There we
professional.
go. There we
I
go.
was like, wow, this is not it. What else? How do y'all, and no shade. Like I'm just talking from my experience. So I never So in that time, I had a baby in 2009, and even motherhood didn't trump my desire to be doing something right? And so blogging came about looking for that right? It was like, oh, I love this idea of, I love to write. I love writing and clothes and things like that. So like really seeing that, kind of similar to seeing the startup space at said company, right? It was like every time I get introduced to something new, I challenge myself to like tap into it. And I think that's just my creative brain wanting to be used, right? And feeling like when I feel like there's no opportunity to do that, I just try to create those things. So that's how that came about. And it was fun. It was a time. That was a time. Like now the influencer space is different. I love it for the girls now. Like they're doing big things. It wasn't that much money. It wasn't that much, back then it was the wild, wild west, but it was fun. And it was like new and exciting. So I try to always tap into things that are like, that make me feel whole, and that I always need something for myself going on. Like even in motherhood, as an adulting, like I still need that something for myself, my creativity, passions to be touched in my daily life.
Quick question. What sports were you into?
I was like a little jock. But I played, my primary sport was basketball. So I played basketball in college, all 4 years, and I ran track and tried other sports, but that was my main sport. So yeah, it was just, it feels like I understand when athletes or professional athletes even like get out of the sport and struggle.
Because they didn't have anything else that
because
they were working
you need something
Transition.
when you're groomed that way. And I played sports since I was 12. When you're groomed that way, I feel like you would make a great entrepreneur. You would make a great creator because you're used to like managing life and that sport and that, thing. So, I think that's the root of who I am and why I am the way I am. It definitely stems back from being like an athlete and, playing sports as a kid and always needing another outlet. Yeah.
Oh, okay. So a couple questions I had.
Okay.
But actually I had one that came to my mind, and this is more about motherhood. How do you go about the conversation of, hey, I'm a single mother and now I'm bringing in a significant other and they have to be introduced to your children? Or like, what's the time frame? Like, do you like, so I know some people might just introduce their children right away.
Right.
Some might be like, nah, let's see how this goes. Or even how do you address the child's feelings, things of that nature?
Yeah. Quite honestly. So the only person, so I had my son in 2019, that relationship ended. I co-parent with his dad very well. His dad is now married.
You definitely said 2019. I just want to clarify.
Oh, sorry. 2009.
Okay.
Okay.
He's like, the math ain't mathing.
I was like,
Yeah.
yes, I'm
Sorry,
doing-
hold on. 2019, I'm thinking about co-tripper. Okay. Birthing that
That was his
child.
third kill.
Okay, I'll see. So I had my son in 2009. And, me and his dad co-parent. He's now married and they have 2 kids. For me, it's really about, one, the parent, where possible, right? I'm speaking to my story, and I always say this because I have empathy for people who can't, right, do the parent for whatever reason, right, with the other person. In my case, that was true. And even the relationship didn't end on great terms, right? It ended, it was rough before I even, got into the relationship where my daughter was born. It was rough to get us to a place where, and I can't speak for him, right? It was rough for me to understand the time that he needed to heal from pain I may have caused in the relationship, right? The relationship ending just in general. And so I really allowed that space to happen before I moved on to another relationship, for me and for him, and for the sake of us parenting, my son. And so I don't move on quickly in relationships. I'm a serial monogamist is what what I call myself. It's crazy that I'm like that way and not married, but that's a whole nother topic. And so for me, it's always about doing my best to set a foundation where the human beings involved are ready for something like that. And my son being young, it wasn't easy to tell if he was ready, but I knew that if my relationship with his dad could be improved and come to a solid place, then that was a good time to move on to another relationship, right? And because I don't really move quickly, like I said, it wasn't a problem for me to hold that space for those events to happen, for that time to happen. My daughter's dad is actually, because I got 2 baby daddies,
Okay.
my daughter's dad is actually, I've known him since high school. So it was kind of me going back to relationships, which I can't say I'll recommend.
No spinning the block?
I mean, spinning the block works for some. So again, it didn't work for me, but if it did work for you, I love that for you. But he was already around, and it kind of seemed sketch, right? Because it's like we had no relationship though. We were actually high school. We dated in high school, but like when I say, people have speculated for years that we were no relation. Like I didn't even look at the man like that, right? And so I think coming out of my, it was like we really reignited through a friendship. It was like, oh, like he already had a child, and I don't know, it just happened, right? But he was already around, so I got a little cheat code because he was already in the picture.
Mm-hmm.
Like he would come to birthdays because we were legitimately friends, right? And so, for me, it was easy to make that transition because it was kind of shady too. Because son's dad was probably like, he probably was here all
the
along.
whole time.
You
So
know?
just to clarify, he came out of the friend zone?
He came out. Well, he was.
Was he in the friend zone?
It sounds
Yeah,
like
he was in the friend zone, but
So
in
it's possible to escape the friend zone?
I've said this,
Okay,
but
but-
nobody believes.
okay, but not
I don't think it's possible.
No,
Hold on.
okay,
the
but
time.
hold on. It wasn't really the friend zone because technically,
Okay.
like in my new big age and experience, right?
Mm-hmm.
He was never in a friend. He was never a friend because we started in a relationship in high school. Like we dated in high
Okay.
school.
True.
Right. So I do believe that you can date people and then be friends with them. I just highly don't recommend doing that now at my big age. Like it's just too problematic.
Yeah.
It's too much. And I think honestly, it's a little disrespectful to, like, if you've had relations with somebody, to be calling him your friend. They ain't really your friend. You know, that's my personal
You
opinion.
know what? I like you. I like
That's
you.
my personal opinion.
Because that's honesty. Like,
That's my
keep
personal
it
opinion.
real.
Yeah. Like, I think looking back, I would have, if I was my son's dad, I'd be like, you little raggedy ass. Like, even though I know that there was nothing on Bible, like, happening between us, it's just the fact that it already had anyway. You know what I mean? That makes it uncomfortable. But go ahead.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
no, I was gonna say that the only way I can really see that being a thing is if you guys have really come to the point where you're like, this is never ever happening again. We tried, it didn't work, and then there's a potential of friendship. But like, I had different opinions about that.
I mean,
like,
I will argue with that because I really did think that.
Let's debate. Hold on.
I really did think that would never, never. I would never talk to him again. Like, I really felt like he was in the friend zone.
did you end initially on a bad terms, or it was just like you guys were young and life changed?
I mean, we were young, and
see-
we were young. I mean, this is high school. Come on now.
That's what the thing about that is that, like, unless there was a definitive, I don't like you, we're not together, like, life just, especially as a young person, it changes.
Those ones are kind of shady because I've been in those situations where it's like we break it off, but there's no communication that is broke. It's just that we just kind of just grow apart. Those are, at least in my experience, come back. The block gets spun. Because it's like nothing definitive happened.
Yeah, nothing negative or like, it was just like,
oh, you went off to college, especially
Exactly.
from high school, right? You went off to
Exactly.
college, I go do something else, and then we kind of link back up when we're in the same vicinity. Maybe we have the same friends,
right,
and then, which is kind of like a cheat code, so I understand that part.
right.
But I don't know, it's interesting.
Yeah, I highly don't recommend now that I've, and not even that relationship ended. It's just like, speaking of a position for myself, right? I don't even want the insecurity that could bloom from me knowing that you are friends with somebody that you once smashed. You know what I'm saying? Like, it would, as a woman, it would make me insecure.
Mm-hmm.
And even if I denied it and said like, oh no, are y'all friends? Like, in the back of my mind,
It'll always be there.
it'll always be there. And the trust, and not to say I wouldn't trust you from it, but I would always feel like I had to be on guard,
Yeah, I think in that space, it's if there is a space where that's possible, the other person needs to be very clear and set very strong boundaries. Because if you're doing stuff that like introduces that doubt,
Right.
then the trust is broken.
But we already, like women, we already have, if we know that, it's one thing, it's like, I think it's critically important that you communicate that, right? And then let me decide if I want to talk to you early on. Like if you got a good girlfriend that's your ex, like, you know what I mean? Like that's dating information. I don't even want to get into a relationship with you and think that that's just your friend to come to find out that you had a relationship with this person. You know, so to me, that's like dating information. And I sever everything now. Like I can't sever my baby daddies and won't. You're going to have to deal with them, okay?
Mhm.
But at the same time, it's like all other relationships, like done.
So is that a red flag? Like if you're talking to somebody and you find out that they're, you know, best friend or whatever, like someone they're really close to, no kids because kids connect things, but
Right.
like no kids, but they're still close with that person. Is that like a red flag for you?
And before you answer that, I want to add something to that. Let's have some fun. So you said that's dating info, right?
Yeah.
If you're thinking about the red flag, what point is the dating info supposed to be in your mind provided?
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And cope that in, put that in with the red flag thing because
Okay, I'm 38, baby. I need you to tell me everything I need to know in the first 3 dates. Okay, I don't have time.
3.
The
I
first
don't-
3 days.
and
First
it can be
3.
the one for real.
For
'Cause, like,
real, the one is the first one is kind
because
of
at this age, it doesn't take many conversations for me to know if I even have the capacity to seriously date. It's so many things that have to be true, right? And to me, if you come out the gate telling me all the things, like I'm coming out the gate. I just don't have time not to, right? I don't have time to shuck and jive, okay? I don't
Okay.
have time, right? So for me, I hate to even put a number on it. I think if the organic conversations that we're having feel like, oh, this is somebody that I could date, and I know that almost like after one conversation, like, is there potential to keep having more conversations, right? Because that's time, and baby, we don't get that back.
Mhm.
Yeah.
This is facts.
So,
yeah.
so for
Facts.
me, it's like I'm gonna start. If I'm gonna say, hey, I really think we have a connection, and I'm feeling you, right? Like, and so let me just tell you certain things that I think you need to know, like about me, about my life, about my family, like all the things, and see if there's still alignment after those conversations, right?
Okay.
In a dating posture. So it's absolutely a red flag if you out here telling me that your best friend is your ex. No, thank you, and have a good day. I'm out. I'm LeBron. I'm picking up my shit.
Oh, not the
Walking out?
meme. With
Oh.
the head
Well,
straight up. Like
I
No.
think it's good to have that conversation because I don't think there's a lot of people even consider providing that information as a thing.
Well,
Mm,
I don't
I
So-
mean, like that's a
Well, I've heard that there is a such thing as providing too much information too soon,
Yeah.
which causes the person to be turned off.
right. I've
So
heard
I
of
think
that.
the organic conversation
You gonna have to be
have
turned off.
Huh?
You gonna have to be turned off.
Well, there you go. There you go.
But that is true. And I think again, I'm 38. Like, I want to know all the information as soon as possible. You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't think to me, that's not a turn off. That's a self-aware man. That's a man who can say, like, here, I'm laying out all this stuff for you. Like, woman, I'm laying out all this stuff for you, and you make a choice. I'm saying that I should have the ability to make a choice, and I want that information as soon as possible. That's all I'm saying. So I've heard of that as like, oh, she's doing too much too soon. We talking about this, that, and the third. That's a red flag. You're not at the emotional maturity level that I need, if that's what you're saying.
And to go back to the conversation we had around at the beginning, is that you're talking to the wrong
The wrong
people.
person.
Exactly.
That popped in my mind.
Yeah,
as soon as you said that.
immediately.
Exactly.
Because you know what, that level of like, oh well, I need you to just give me the tidbit so that I can feel. No, I to your point, like I don't have time for that. I
Yeah.
literally don't have time.
I wish I did. I don't actually wish I did.
No,
I
yeah,
don't.
like who
I don't.
wants that? Like
I
I
don't.
mean,
I think we do that. We do that when we're younger.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh,
we
yeah,
put
for sure.
on the mask. We eat right. As women.
I don't want to make any mistakes, so I'm not going to talk
Right.
too much.
Yeah.
Like,
Right. We put up the filters. Like
Yeah.
and I think like just like on social media, one day somebody gonna have to see your real face.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mhm.
Somebody gonna see all that.
The good thing I do think this came out of COVID, like the focus on like mental health has been it's like forefront, and I do think there's some negatives with that because I do feel like people use it incorrectly.
Yeah.
I've heard the word gaslighting way more times than I ever wanted to, but I do think there is something to be said about like valuing your space, valuing your time, because I think that COVID really put a emphasis on the fact that we don't know how much time.
Exactly.
We literally have
Yeah.
no. There's a lot of people that are gone. It sounds horrible to say it that way, but a lot of
Yeah.
people that are gone that were just living. So
Yeah.
it is interesting. I'll throw it back
Yeah.
for you questions.
So another one for you.
Yeah.
When we talk about like parenting styles,
Mhm.
right? Is your parenting style similar to the way your parents raised you,
Mhm.
or is it different, or how was your parents raised you? I don't know if your mother and father were both in the relationship or anything. I
Mhm.
mean, in that relationship, but kind of give us more of like what the parenting style for you is.
Yeah. I mean, I'm a pretty transparent parent. I think it's important to be a human to my kids. I think a lot of times parents, I'll speak for myself. Like my mom, again, like I never looked at her as a single mom. My mom was present. She came to all my sporting games. My dad lived with him very briefly. And I'm the youngest of five. So I was raised primarily by my mom. She left my dad when I was 3. So I guess I really appreciated that now, and looking back, I appreciated that I did not view my mom as a single mom, right? I didn't, from a child's perspective, I didn't, again, I think for me, it just felt like I wasn't lacking anything. I think it's very different. My children's experience, I'm very vocal about being a single mom. And then there's so many things in this community that that can trigger people from me, that have triggered people from me saying that, because I have co-parents, right? And so it's like, are you a single mom if you have co-parents? And I'm very much a single mom. But I raised my kids to accept other people's humanity and to be humans themselves, right? And so I'm not the mom who tries to do it all. I probably am subconsciously, because I do a lot of, like, I'm intentional, right? So there are some times where I could learn, and this comes from being single for a long time. It's like I'm, what is the word? I don't quite know how to not lead. And so that, as a parent, right? So I'm sure that my kids see a lot of leadership. And that comes from just me managing parenthood by myself. Like, I have to do what needs to be done,
get things
right?
done, yeah.
But I think as a parent, I try to embrace non-traditional things, especially like that I grew up with, especially for my son. Like, I encourage him to cry, to communicate, to express his emotions, and that's not weakness, that's strength. I challenge him. Sometimes I think too hard, but I definitely think there is a difference in how I parent my son versus my daughter, but it's it's based on who they are as humans, again. And so there's
Not gender.
No, who they are as people, right? And what I perceive that they need and what they communicate that they need, right? And I'm always asking questions so I can better understand what they need and who they are.
So you're not the type to be like, oh, do this because I said do this. Why? Because I said so.
Sometimes, yeah. Because sometimes
yeah,
that's
okay.
what they need, right? And they're children, so they don't really know that. But I'm very intentional, so I do know that. So I think, like, it's not without context. So I don't say do
Context
this
is big.
because
Yeah.
I said do it. I say you are going to do this because you need to develop X, Y, and Z, or you need to understand X, Y, and Z, right? So
I
it's
like
not
that.
just like, because I said so. Like, I give them the context. So
Okay.
at the end of the day, you still
Gotta do
gotta
it.
do what I
this.
said
You
do.
got to do what I said,
But context goes a long
It
way.
does.
yeah, and I try my best to always provide that context, right? And ask them questions like, so if you don't do this, then X, Y, and Z, right? And so I think that I'm a very open parent. I think I allow my children to have voices. I can't say that I didn't have a voice when I was a kid, but I definitely knew my place, right? I was raised in such a way that, like, you didn't say certain things to your parents, or you didn't go against your parents. And to me, it was like the rule. It wasn't like anybody, my mom really just, they say the mom look. I don't know
Yo.
how the hell I absorbed what the look meant.
I absorbed it on my side too.
Yeah.
Right,
100%.
but I knew
You
shut
already
the
knew.
fuck up.
Yup.
You know what I'm saying?
This is a place where like adults are talking. You don't need to talk right now, little boy. Like,
Exactly. Like, but you knew.
Yeah.
Like I feel like, I mean, at some point, they probably said it, but like, I think my kids, they will be in this room right now. Excuse me. Hey, what are you guys doing? Like, they don't have that absorption that we had of those things. But I guess they're also raised differently, right? So
Yeah.
like, if
The
you ever
society's
if you
different
ever
now,
heard a
yeah.
mom on Zoom and their kids or a dad and the kids come up and like, okay, mommy's on the call. Like, it's more like we do that, like our kids are a little more liberal and free.
It's so interesting you say that, because I do think as a young, as a child, I was a little bit more like what you're describing with your kids, because I do remember a couple times saying things I should not have said, in like, oh, but you said she said this,
Right.
and I did that. I was that kid.
You were that kid.
I
don't be
remember.
that
I also
kid,
remember.
like-
Oh, you
I
would
remember-
be that kid.
It's surprising because thinking about myself now is like,
This
oh,
was
okay.
between me and you. You're not supposed to tell other
Dude.
outside forces about what we're
But
talking about.
I was the thing for me is like I was like raised by my grandparents, and so I was considered like their kid, and all the other kids were adults, so they got to do things a little differently. So I do remember, excuse me, I do remember one time talking to somebody, and she was like, "Oh my God, you look at this boat," and I'm like, "Why is she acting like I've never seen a boat before? I live on an island," and I'm like, it was weird to think back about that, because literally that was feisty Kyle, and I was feisty Kyle. I was young, so it is interesting. Speaking about like parenting styles, you are, and I don't know how much you want to get into, but you have like a teenage boy, and that seems to be a very interesting age, especially when you introduce dating and all that stuff with them. How,
And from a single mom point too,
Yeah.
right? Raising a young man.
I don't know how much you can go into that, because I don't know if you'll see it or not.
He ain't
but,
gonna
you know.
watch this. He watching whatever the hell he watch on TikTok. He is not interested in anything
Hey,
I'm
listen,
doing.
You might pop up on his TikTok feed. We don't know.
Yeah,
Lord.
true.
Okay, so the question is,
Like, how do you deal? How do you even frame how you talk about, like, the birds and the bees?
ain't no birds
conversation?
and bees.
Okay, that's good.
Oh, we very keep it 100 in my house. And sometimes his dad be like, you said that? I'm like, yes, I sure did. It's
Okay,
a
how-
penis,
how
it's a
old is-
vagina, sex causes kids,
How old is he
disease.
right now?
He'll be 15 in September.
15.
So I'm a straight shooter. Like, I'm not gonna embarrass him but I do have, just like you would talk to not your friends, so to speak, but the terminology you would use. Like, I call things what they are. I tell him sex is, I know that you're looking at it. I know you've probably seen it. I hope you're not doing it. And here's why, right? I'm a very straight shooter. So, like, he even blushes. He's like, did she really just say that?
Are we
And I'll be
talking
like,
about this? Like,
yeah, and I really said that. Because I think it's important, like, I don't want the first real conversation or real words or real outcomes that can come from such behaviors to be consumed elsewhere,
Yeah.
right? So I let you consume them right in this house. It's kind of how you say, like, you don't want your kids to drink, you give them alcohol at home.
Yep.
You let them see it, you let them...
there's a science to that.
Yep.
Because when you try to be super strict and lay down the law,
Mm-hmm.
it could create the rebellious type of energy, which is worse than if you just have them at home. You're like, here's a sip of some alcohol.
Yeah.
Right.
Like, instead of just, oh no, you can never drink ever until you're out of this house, da da da.
Right.
So I think there is a science to that.
Yeah, and I'm very pro that. I'm very pro, like, I want to be the first person to talk to you about it. I want I want you looking for that information. Like, and I always tell him, like, you can never say that you're one of those kids who didn't know.
Yeah.
And that's my goal as a parent, raising a young man, like, about your safety, about police, about race. Like, you get that
Realistic
all,
things,
Yes,
yeah.
you're gonna get that from my mouth. So you can never form your lips to say you didn't know, right? I try to educate. Again, I'm like a learner personality, right? So it's important for me to educate my kids. Like, and so with him, it's a lot. I was just talking about this the other day. I was like, I understand men so much better. Oh wow. Some things are from birth. I don't know if it's genetic. I don't know what but it's innately in
Is
this.
it a newfound appreciation?
I think
Oh, frustration.
Or
Both.
frustration, right?
both. But I think it's been so eye-opening for me in looking at my views of men sometimes. Like raising a man has definitely positively, again, I didn't grow up with my dad, right? So I don't have a traditional male figure. And that's not just from a parental standpoint, that's just from a day-to-day vantage point. Like I didn't have that, right? And so growing up in my relationships, I've had, vantage points of a man on a daily basis, but raising my son really brought it home for me. And I want him to be a good man, like I just want him to be a good human being.
Be a good human being.
Yeah, and so education is just important. So I think like teen years are very different than from my personal experience as a teen girl, right? To a teen boy. But to me, it's just like repetition, education. And it drives me crazy, the repetition part. Oh my God.
So that leads me to think that you have increased your patience ability.
Yeah. As a person, as a human.
Because I remember you were saying something about the earlier about rejection and things of that nature, and like keep going. Sounds like there's a level of patience there.
Yeah, I mean, parenting has definitely, and I've been a parent since 24, so kind of youngish, right? And so for me, it's just been like so much development of patience, of understanding, of empathy that my kids have brought into my life, that like it's really easy to transfer. To transfer the sentiment behind those things that I'm learning to other areas of my life, which have been tremendous in business. I'm like, if you could have kids, you could have a business as a baby, you could definitely do that. I mean, even if you don't, I'm not saying like, cause some people don't want to have kids, or whatever. Yeah. But for me, I think that has been a great teacher, right? For me to use those lessons across my life, not just in the parenting realm. Even as me as a person, like I have separation between me and my kids, and like, I'll be like, get out my room and don't knock on my door and the food is in the fridge, because I'm also a human, And so it really helped me develop, what I needed as a person, not even from a parental standpoint, as a person, like I need a little bit of space. And if I can say that with my kids, in a relationship, in a friendship, in a business partnership, that's going to be true. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? That's who I am, So it's been great. Like it's been challenging. Again, I'm not going to lie that not growing up in a traditional household with two parents, I'm not bashing that. That's wonderful. That's amazing if that was a healthy environment for you, right? And we all have trauma. I always say like everybody has trauma.
Yeah, no doubt.
I can be trying to do the best that I can, but one thing could affect my kids in such a way that hurts them, that they carry. Yeah. And it could be something small to me, but it could be something big. It's no way of knowing those nuances as a parent, as a person, right? So I know my kids will have trauma, and trauma is a good thing. Trauma is a teacher. You know what I'm saying? Like now it's levels to it.
It's levels. Yeah.
Now I'm not saying like abuse or things like that. That is an unfortunate thing. That is a thing that I wish people didn't have to experience. But when I think about trauma, it's like things that affect me that I really don't have control over, right? You're a kid, you're learning yourself, something happens to you, you're trying to process it. Now the degrees of how severe that is a scale, right? With everything else. But like, I know my kids will have trauma, right? And I want them to be humans. And again, I talk to them and I raise them in a certain way that they don't have to carry it, that they can have a traumatic occurrence and have a conversation. So they don't have to carry that the rest of their lives. Like they can have a safe space in me as a mom. I could talk to her about anything, the darkest thing, the hardest thing, the best thing, the most amazing thing, right? I want to be that safe haven so that even though they may experience a traumatic event, that they don't have to carry trauma. Because I think that's the part, right? Yeah. Like you carry it because you've held it, or you haven't had a safe space to release it, or, it's just a terrible thing that happened to you and you don't know how to talk about it. You don't want to talk about it. So I think like for me, the number one thing is just being able to, with both my kids, not just a teen, because there's definitely challenges with my 7-year-old. Like she is like a lot. Feminine energy, 1,000, And I'm kind of like a hybrid where I feel like I have a masculine energy and feminine energy. Like I feel like I was a tomboy, I was an athlete. So there's certain traditionally male traits that I carry as a woman, right? And so I'm kind of balanced in that way, I believe. So I think her, even she's a lot. I'm like, God, I'm exhausted. Like, girl, sit down. Like like my friends will be like, she's like you, Kyle. Like, girl, nobody asked you to say that to nobody else, but I be saying to you. But like, she's in the car, my friend's cracking up. She picked her up from school one day, and she's like, my mom, she was asleep on the couch, and she was taking a nap, and she was like, girl, can you calm down? Can you sit down? Like, you know what I mean? Like, she was just going on and on how I be taking a nap on the couch and doing my thing, you know? And it was just so funny because she was like, girl, calm down. Like, she was like my voice and everything. My friend was reenacting it. And I'm like, yeah, because she's a lot. And I want her to hold space for her to be a lot. But again, like I have to separate myself so I'm not depleted as a human. So I'm like, girl, please. Shh. Thank you.
How do you start to create that space though? Because I feel like that's a hard thing. And it's also something that I know I didn't get growing up. Like I'm from a Caribbean family. They're like, do as I say, not as I do. And, you know, you'll have to deal with whatever comes with that. Like, that's literally how it's been. You know, it's like, so there was like, even now, like, I think I was blessed because I spent a lot of time with my aunt who's a therapist. And so she kind of forced some of that, like, oh, we're going to have these conversations. And even thinking about it that way before it became like mental health became like a trendy thing, it was like something that she thought about. But like, how do you create that space, and how would you recommend people even try that?
From a parental standpoint?
I
mean, I was like that too. You know, I grew up, I didn't really challenge the status quo of how Black families were. You know what I mean? Like, whatever goes on in this house stays in this house. You know what I mean? There's certain idioms or whatever you call them that we just, we know.
We all know it.
Don't be out there telling everybody our business.
Yes. You know what I'm saying? And so I think in a way that is harmful for kids who have trauma or a traumatic experience or an occurrence or sad or happy or whatever, because like that thought in itself, like what about the good things? What about but it creates a barrier as to what like you can communicate and what you should communicate and what you should talk to people about and what you should not talk to people about. And so for me, I mean, even going back to the conversations with my son and how I'm very like explicit. I mean, not inappropriate explicit, but call things by their name and outcomes by what they could be. I don't want them to feel like there's anything. I want them to feel like there's a safe space somewhere. And I even say, if you can't tell me, tell your dad, tell somebody you trust, tell your aunt, I'm not the end all be all, right? No, and I know that sometimes you may feel comfortable, but like I encourage them to develop their own relationships by way of communication to people in those spaces. And I think it comes from how we grew up. It's like, what goes on here? Like we said, you know what I mean? And so I personally was what I like to think a pretty decent kid, good kid, you know? But I wish I had somebody to talk to about some of the things I may have seen or experienced that I didn't quite know how to process as a kid, right? I grew up with siblings. I saw drugs. No shade to my mom or anybody. These were older kids' choices, right? And so that's why I've seen that from a sibling perspective, right? And so for me, it's like, if I don't talk to them about it, if I don't create a space to tell them that it's okay to talk to me or someone else about things, I think it's carrying on the generational curse, so to speak, about around mental health, right? I think a lot of those things that we grew up with contribute to the state of why so many Black and brown people struggle with mental health, like those thought processes. And so it's hard because sometimes it's like, I actually didn't want to know that. I did not want to know that, okay? And so, or I didn't want to see that. I took the phone, but I didn't really want to know what was on that phone that I saw.
Damn.
And it's like, now I have to process that as a parent. And so it's like trial and error, it's give and take. But at the end of it, it's like, as a human, what would you want? I think we all know as humans, like, what would we want? How could we thrive as people? Like, what needs to be true? And I think some of that is universal, right? If you sat down and you talked to really what people needed, I think a lot of that is universal. And so I take the pieces that I feel like are universal, and I try to transfer them to my kids. Like, I don't want to say, be like me, do like me, and all this, whatever. But I'm like, embrace the human that you are. But I think if you can communicate, if that you have a safe space, if that you know you can talk to me about anything, that doesn't mean the consequence is going to be what you, or the outcome, or the whatever is, you know, is going to be favorable to you. Like, understanding that it may be a consequence, right? But that shouldn't deter you from telling me, because I'm going to find out.
Yeah.
I'd rather you tell me than me
Yeah,
find out.
If I
Exactly.
find out, that's going to be an issue.
Yeah,
You know what
yeah.
I'm saying? That's going to be a bigger issue, right? And so that part is really important. The outcome is not going to be favorable all the time that you say something,
Yeah.
but you should still say something, right? And it may not be favorable because now somebody knows something about you that you don't feel good about, or that it's bad, or whatever. And typically they skew negative, right? I think it sucks, you know, like you know, the things that the mental health, you know, usually comes from a negative, right? Something bad that happens to you. But it can also come from not being celebrated or praised when something good happens to you.
That's
so
true.
I try to be really mindful. Like, you can develop like with my kids, because I try not to harp on the negative stuff that happens, but really to advocate and celebrate and like help them tap into their talents and the positive stuff, so that they feel celebrated when things happen, just like they feel disciplined when things happen that they do that's negative or wrong. So that's just my approach. I do not get it right all the time. I will not sit here and pretend that I do, but I think that's my conscious intention and effort with them, is to raise them in a way that where I'm trying to get it right more times than wrong. And when I get it wrong, they can talk to me about it, and they can say, "Mom, you got it wrong." And I'm like, "Okay, well, let's talk about it. What did I do wrong?"
That's the interesting one about giving the feedback back to the parent, right? Because I didn't grow up in a space where I could give feedback, because I was living with my stepdad at the time. Now, like my stepdad is no longer in the picture. It's more of my birth dad, I guess you call it, and my mom. But when my stepdad was around, it was more of a like, yo, like, don't question nothing I do. I can't ask you about the feedback. And that did create some type of like, so like, you know how you say trauma could be good or bad? The way he raised me, it did create a space for, or a type of energy in me to like always be about my business, because he was so strict, but also having the understanding of like, yo, some of those things are unacceptable. And like, if I was to have a kid, right, you know, there's certain things that I would tell them like, hey, this, like, being like a dependable person and being respectful, and because I had to be like, yes, sir, yes, ma'am, in the house, right? Which has allowed me in the workspace to know how to speak to people,
Right.
But then there's also like, hey, there needs to be a space where you can be free and experience love and stuff like that. So like when I'm hearing you talking, I'm like, yo, I appreciate that you're being transparent with them and actually explaining things, because I like when I was growing, it was no explanation.
Yeah. No context.
No, like, yo, this is what it is. And as I got older, in hindsight, I'm like, dang, man, like that's not cool. Like, because if anything, it pushed me more to be disobedient. Because I'm like, well, you know, fuck you then. Like,
Right.
to be frank, like as a kid too.
Right.
Yeah.
But when you can sit down and explain, like I think sometimes people feel like because it is a kid that there's no point of explaining things to them or giving them the shadow of a doubt that, hey, if I explain this to you in a respectful way, I know it's a kid, but in a respectful way,
Right.
that they'll understand and take that. And then, like you said, keep putting it into their brain
Yeah.
instead of trying to, I don't know, like beat it into their brain. You know,
Yeah.
there's different ways to tackle it. So I just wanted to call that out. It was interesting.
Yeah.
The important part of everything I heard you say is the communicate part. And I've been saying that constantly because I feel like the biggest problems we have in society is from a lack of communication. Like that's at the core. If we could solve how we communicate, or even understand that the way you communicate might not be the way that I communicate, but we find a balance the way everybody's on the same page,
Right.
allows us to do better as a society.
Yeah.
So, but the context thing is big for me. And that's something like if I do have kids, I'll try to do, because I do feel like I remember there's times when my uncle would tell you, hey, don't do this thing. And I'm like, okay, but like he remember he telling me, oh, don't go out there and be super materialistic. And I'm like, okay, what does that mean, right? Like, why?
Mm-hmm.
He did have a valid point. He's like, don't spend all your money on clothes. Don't spend all your money on this, right?
Right.
If that was conveyed in a way where it's like, because you want to make sure you save money for this, you handle yourself a little differently. It's a different thing than just like, don't, because I'm like, well, okay, well, why not? I see everybody else doing it.
Right.
Mhm.
I see everybody else just doing exactly what you told me not to do. Please tell me why.
Yeah.
I think that allows for a space for me to understand, and the understanding allows for growth.
Yeah. And bringing it like, I think bringing it to the level of your audience, who you're talking to. So like if I'm talking to my kids, right, instead of saying, don't spend your money, don't be materialistic. I fire these things off to my son, but I'll say like, all right, you want a Lamborghini. What kind of job do you think you need to have a Lamborghini? What kind of work ethic do you think you need to develop to sustain that job? Because that's a lot of money on that car, right?
Yeah.
So I'll just like probe him. I'll just keep probing him, and then he'll be like, he'll get it. He'll be like, okay, I just wanted to say I want a Lamborghini, but you had to do all that. You know what I'm saying? And so, or sometimes I'll like try another method. I'll say like, oh, I'm gonna be riding around in your Lamborghini, but like what's the savings plan? You know what I mean? So then I'll be like, oh, look at this app. Look at this cool app I found where it'll help you. So like if you get $30 from your birthday, you could put like 10 in your savings, 10 in your charitable giving, and then just spend the rest of that shit. And they love to spend because in real life, you spend majority of the money you make, right?
Yeah.
And so breaking it down like that, you only have to save $10. You know what I mean? Like, and so for him, it's like, oh shit, I'll just put 10 in here that I could do. Yes, but teaching them on that low level, and so I've tried a lot of different things, and he's actually very conscious of money. He still spends, and now like you say, everybody else. I mean, the social media for these kids is redunculous.
Yeah.
The influencer as a career is redunculous in their perspective of future self, right? And I'm like, that's lovely. I love the influence. Get your bag, sis, bro. Get your bag. But I'm like, the sustainability of that, I've just, as when you're older and you're a parent, you have wisdom. That's what you have over your kids. So there is certain things you say that you it's pure from a wisdom and I've lived perspective. I have more years here than you have, right? And so I just feel like it's not sustainable, right? And that's what I'm running into with my son, at least, because he's of the age of like YouTubers, and I'm like, technology changes so fast. I'm like, that's great. But I don't even seen one YouTube video that you and you think it's easy, but I would like to see you looking at that as a career. Like, I think I need to see proof is in the, where's the videos? What's
your proof of concept?
Well, the one thing I will call out is I do remember as a young, well, I guess I was a little older then, but like video games being a thing and people talking about, oh, you're wasting all your time playing video games, and now there's people making millions of dollars just playing video games. So is there a balance of like, well, this is what this is my experience, because like when our parents were growing up, the computers weren't a thing. Yeah. Right? Like, so the information that they got, you had to go to a library and you had to use the little thing that listed out by alphabetical order. So like our access to information was a little different. Right. So how do you feel, like you said he has aspirations of YouTube, like how do you like support that, but also, add a sense of, I don't like to use the word realism, because realism it has negative connotation a lot of times. But like realism, I don't know how else to say it.
I tell him to research how many millionaires, billionaires, how many, tell me the numbers on this, right? How many people are in the world? It's just like professional sports. He's an athlete too, right? He aspires to, play basketball, and he's playing now, but on his high school team, right? That's the next step for him. And I'm saying, how many people make the basketball team? How many people try out? How many people don't try out at all, right? So when you think about the numbers of it, there's only a small amount of people who are actually making sustainable careers out of gaming. It's not a big number, right? And so I tell him that it's possible, but then I look at him and say, well, what have you done towards that? Like, what steps have you taken towards me considering that a viable option for you, or you believing that's a viable option for yourself, right? And so I always say, if everybody could be LeBron James. You know what I mean? Like everybody can't be LeBron James.
Yeah.
It's just a fact. LeBron, there's only one.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think how you bring them down to reality is like, one, you make them accountable for the work and the work ethic that's needed towards a certain track, right? Nothing's stopping him from being a YouTuber right now. Why aren't you doing it?
Yeah.
Where's the time going towards this thing that you want to be, right? And now it's like I said, he's more focused on sports. But again, I'm like, okay, any work that you do, there has to be improvement. There has to be like a progression forward, right? And so I challenge him to think about his progression forward in choosing what he wants to do. Because if you're serious about something, you'll work hard at it. There's no cheat code for that.
Yeah.
You know, if you're passionate about something, whether it's math, whether you want to be a teacher, whatever it is as a kid, with doctor, whatever you want to be, there is a certain work ethic that is visible, that is apparent towards that thing. You're a great student, or you're, practicing every day, or you're doing. So I challenge him to analyze those actionable things that validate that that's something he's passionate about or wants to do. Because I can say I want to be an astronaut. I ain't opened one book about space. I don't know shit about the planets.
Right.
You see what I'm saying? How to be an astronaut?
Yeah,
I can say you can say anything.
Yeah.
And that's the main thing. Talk is just that. It's cheap. It's easy. Proof is in the pudding.
Yep.
I'm trying to tell you. So that's what I use for him, right? My daughter's, she wants to be an artist, but let me tell you, she draws every day.
Oh wow. Okay.
Every day. I don't tell her to do it. And she says, she wants to be a lot of things, an artist, a gymnast, a singer. She can't sing. She can sing.
She'll get better.
As good as she can. But,
right. I mean,
but you know what I'm saying? But I see when she says I want to be an artist, it moves me because I see her drawing every day without being prompted, without being asked to. She turns on YouTube videos and she finds a thing she wants to, and she draw. It's now the paper all around the house drive me crazy. I didn't bought bins, desks, cabinets, storage. The paper's everywhere. Okay, the paper's everywhere. But I don't get mad at that because I feel like she's aware. She's tapped into something she's passionate about. And so I pick up the papers every day because she's very messy. Very messy. But I don't even have to, and I don't like to compare my kids. It's very hard not to when you're explaining the difference, because they will ask you, my kids at least do, like, why does she get to do that? Or why do you say this to her? Or why doesn't she, and so I do the best I can at explaining that. But I say, families learn from each other. That's a great gift that you have to have a sister. It's a great gift for her to have a brother, because her examples of how to be treated, if you throw her around, sir, if you're mean to her, you're modeling for her.
Yeah, yeah.
And I'm like, and then you're gonna be mad. You're gonna be the big bad wolf if somebody
Big bro
does the same thing she's used to, So I tell them to be mindful and intentional, but like it's the same messaging for like their passions. To me, it's like your actions. Your actions will tell you everything that you need to know. Like, I hear what you're saying, but your actions will also message to me as a parent what I say, how I respond, because like, if you're not serious, to me, I'll tell you as a parent. I'm like, you're not serious. When you're serious, then we can have a conversation. When I see you putting in the work, we can have a conversation, right? And so I say the comparison thing because he'll be like, well, Harper does this or Harper does that, and you don't say this. And I'm like, but I see her activate. I talk to her and I respond to her in a certain way because I see her activation around something. And I'm trying to help you understand that I see you activate too, but this is what you're communicating you want to do. And the activation around that thing ain't activating.
Yeah.
Okay, so.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
I know. Well, we could be here all day, especially once you get into the comparison conversation, because we had like, Aaron was here for last time we had that conversation about like parents comparing you, and I feel like in the Caribbean that's like literally you get compared to like the dude down the street, and I'm like, yo, you don't even know this guy. This dude could be an axe murderer, but
right.
he has good grades. But what is one thing like in closing? What's one thing you would say to like your younger self about like keeping motivated and like seeing your stuff through, like? What's like one piece of advice you would give yourself, or maybe if yourself is too challenging, maybe model to like
To the people.
to the people.
To the people out there.
Wow, so many layers there. It's hard to pinpoint one thing. Because again, I'm like a learner, and so everything is everything to me. I would say, damn, this is hard. I hate this question.
Hot seat.
I would say the question again.
Pretty much, what would you tell your younger self about like your dreams or what you're trying to accomplish, or like staying motivated through hard times or whatever? Like,
Yeah.
Through the rejections.
I know. I would say pursue things that you are passionate about, because that's what sustains you through the ups and downs. That's what makes the ups feel really amazing and wonderful, and the downs feel motivating and grounded to keep you pushing. Right. I think that's the most important thing. I think anything without passion is a waste of time at this point. Like if you're doing anything now, sometimes we gotta do like work. Sometimes we're not passionate about our jobs, but we need the money. That's a point. There's a point to that though.
Yeah.
A check. You know what I'm saying? But I think like when you really want to do great things, pursue things that move you. Like even if they're unpopular, even if they're controversial, pursue the things that you're deeply passionate about.
gotcha. I like that. So I guess tell people where they can find you.
Nowhere.
Well,
Yeah,
I'm
drop
kidding.
the real
place.
the real place now.
Right.
Take two.
I'm everywhere on social. I'm not very active, but you can find my company CoTripper at www.cotripper.co. We're on social, I think, at CoTripper for most platforms: TikTok, Instagram. My personal, Krystin Hargrove, on Instagram and across platforms. And I don't have a personal website. Maybe I should get one. That's how you can find me.
Maybe. Well, this has been fun. We went all over.
Yeah.
I know it's kind of like
appreciate it.
a rando.
No, but it's
Dive
combination
deep a little bit though.
of things.
the one thing I like about having these conversations is that there's a lot of nuggets and stuff that come out that we would not have been able to plan for, right? Like we could have said, oh, we're going to talk about these things, but like this was just like a natural conversation that's what we do in Juxtaposed. It's literally just diving deep into one thing, and then we have whole podcasts about this thing, and then it's like an hour and a half long, and we're like, that's not what we planned.
Right.
So I appreciate you, stopping by, and we're definitely gonna try to have you back at some point. But
yes, I can.
Yeah,
I can
definitely appreciate you
I
coming
definitely
through.
will come back anytime.
sounds good.
Those
Sounds
are
good.
great.
And I like
So-
your presence too. You're
Yeah.
very like articulate.
Oh, thank you.
articulating with
Thank
the-
you.
good
Yeah,
presence.
this is why I try to get her to do more of these, because she's good at it, even though she don't want to do it. But it's all good, all good. That was a little petty, but we're gonna end on that note. So thank you if you made it this far. We appreciate you. Make sure you subscribe to the channel, all that fun stuff. If you have questions for Krystin, add them in the Discord or
Put them all in the social comments.
comment
I'm gonna be
below.
on there responding. Okay.
Yes. So if you made it this far, we appreciate you. Have a good day. Peace.
Peace.